This is an apocalyptic time, ripe with divine possibilities. The root of the word apocalypse means to uncover, to reveal. Our world has long been on fire, designed to indulge a few on the labor and the oppression of many. And we have been trained to think this is normal, inevitable, just the way things are. And so often our habits of faith and theology have buttressed these violent norms. But those most violently targeted have always called out and organized for liberation, to build a world where all could thrive. Our faiths have always included prophetic leadership. Like the tectonic pressures internal to our globe, the work of liberation is always present, sometimes surfacing like an earthquake or a volcanic eruption. But now the forces have been multiplied exponentially, crafting an atmosphere ready for a more cataclysmic shift. Like when the landmass of Pangea separated into the continental bodies that we know today. All of the sociocultural fault lines are quaking, calling for a reckoning and a building of a new world. We can feel it as we witness those native to this land fight both for their sacred sites and the protection of the water and resources necessary for us all. As millions insist that Black Lives Matter, something that shouldn't even have to be said, and are pushing back against state violence, of police shootings, and a prison and detention system that decimates Black communities and destroys the families of those seeking asylum and shelter. As a pandemic lays bare the violent impacts of an economic system that determines human worthiness and access to health and home through corporate bottom lines. And the growing refusal to allow sexual violence in all its forms to go unnamed, covered up, and used as a tool of control and enforcement. The call grows louder to face the global impact of the United States settler colonialist history of genocide and enslavement, along with the collaboration of the Christian church. This is a time of uncovering the violence of our institutions and our relationships. It's a time to build structures and practices that serve all of God's creation and perpetuate justice. To build a liberated world requires prophetic protest and strategic organizing, institutional reimagining, and relational change. And all of this depends on a spiritual revolution, a complete reimagining of our ethics, our faithfulness, our values, and our call. Through this series of monthly talks and popular education workshops, each of Vanderbilt Divinity School's co-curricular programs will facilitate conversations and workshops to deepen and shift our spiritual practices to equip us for the hard, joyous work of building a thriving world for all. This series has been visioned by the Cal Turner Program in Moral Leadership, the Carpenter Program in Religion, Gender, and Sexuality, the Kelly Miller Smith Institute on Black Church Studies, the Public Theology and Racial Justice Collaborative, the Religion and the Arts and Contemporary Culture Program, and the Wendland Cook Program in Religion and Justice. We are so grateful and ready to be in this work with you.
Hello, y'all. We're so glad to be with you tonight. And Reverend Dr. Dayanara Marte, we are so thankful that you are spending your evening with us. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you because you're going to create our container for the evening.
Hi, Lindsay, and everybody who's watching. Thank you so much. This is such an amazing honor to start off your series and to be in partnership with everybody today. I want to start us off. Usually, when you come into things like this, it's talk. And so what I wanted to do was give you an experience of what a spiritual revolution looks like. Well, when we start one and we invoke one with the intention of spirituality, what does that look like? And so I'm going to ask everybody who is watching, everybody who's at home, if you're driving, you can just kind of focus on the road and pay attention. But wherever you are, I'm going to ask everyone to just take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. And just thanking yourself for being here today. I'm going to lead you into a meditation. This time is calling for our faith to be intersectional. And this is not just going to be a meditation. It's going to be a call to action that's going to require for you to make a spiritual contract with yourself, a call to action that will require for you to make a spiritual contract with your ancestors. You can take a moment to think about who you want to call into this space with you on this journey that we're embarking on, these political times where we have had to pivot to working from home, where we are dealing with racial unrest in all of our communities and uprisings and revolutions, when we are managing COVID-19 and the loss and the grief that has come with that, and taking a deep breath into social isolation and all of what that has meant for you, for your family, for our communities. This meditation is a call to action that's going to require for you to make a spiritual contract where you let your ancestors know that this is their time to lead, that we cannot do this by ourselves, where we put our humanities to the back and ask our ancestors, our spirit guides, to be above, below, within, and at our sides in this spiritual and man-made war that we are fighting. This call to action will require for you to make a spiritual contract with yourself, for you to build a new relationship that has a commitment for you to end the internalization of white supremacy and patriarchy and capitalism that lives within and that you have learned to survive in this very unjust system. And when you're ready, I want you to take a deep breath and place your hands anywhere in your body where you are feeling this time. Anywhere in your body that hasn't had a moment to just feel and to rest and to exhale and to breathe. Because this call to action is going to have you thinking about what you deserve beyond the basic human needs that capitalism has taken from us and that it has distorted. This is not just a meditation. It is a call to action that is going to require a spiritual contract to liberate your mental, emotional, and spiritual health and well-being from trauma, from violence, and oppression. And finally, this is not just a meditation. It's a call to action that will require you to make a spiritual contract to align all areas of your life with the future that we deserve to create. So I invite you in the area of relationship to yourself and others. May you align them to be in service of your divine purpose and your greater good of humanity. In your finances, may you align your financial exchanges with your worth and your loyalty. May you be open to the blessings and abundance that is yours. May your projects be in alignment with your politic, with your integrity, with your word, and match who you are in the world. May you align your courageous and powerful energy to what you are up to and what your spirit is manifesting. May you align your home and family to be in alignment with your bigness, with your most beautiful, unapologetic, unstoppable self. May you align yourself with your divine purpose and your spirit work with your friends and your networks, your collectives. May they be reflective of what is possible, of what you stand for in the liberation, accountability, responsibility, love, and integrity that the world needs right now. And in your health, may your body sustain you as you grow spiritually. May the weight of trauma and oppression and violence fall off this fall season as you put yourself first. Take a deep breath in and giving yourself a moment for your mind to rest, asking for your creativity and passion to return, giving yourself a moment for your body to restore itself to its natural, healthy state. I am invoking my ancestors and yours so that you have physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and economic health this season and for what it's going to take for the rest of this year. May we have forgiveness. May we let go of blame and shame and doubt and step into and above what we believe is possible. May we love ourselves first. May we not settle. May we keep boundaries that help us stay connected but make ourselves a priority. May we ask for what we need. May you be power in silence, pushing yourself to create and be accountable for your dreams. And again, this is not just a meditation. It's a call to action that's requiring you and asking you to create a spiritual contract where you see yourself and each other in a world that deems you invisible, that is asking us to love each other, but is teaching us hate, in a world that is telling us to forgive each other, but is punishing us, and in a world that is asking us to use our cultural medicine to heal, but is keeping us sick. May we trust each other in a world that breeds individualism and blame. And in this new spiritual contract, may you put yourself front and center when I know that all we want to do is hide and protect ourselves in a world that is killing us. Take a deep breath in, placing your hands on your belly button, and taking a deep breath into forgiveness for a past that you had no control over, for the injustice, the abandonment, and the neglect that you may be feeling. Take a deep breath in, and let's take a moment of silence for those that have passed, that have been taken, for the parts of us that have died because of what is happening in the world, for what we've had to witness, the parts of us that we have lost on this journey. And we dedicate today to those living with violence, those that have survived, those of us that are products, and those that have passed. If there's anybody else that you want to dedicate today to, this is the time. And finally, take a deep breath into the spiritual contract that you are making with yourself, your future self, your divine self, and your ancestors by joining us today. Thank you. And when you're ready, slowly bring yourself back.
That's not a normal start to a webinar, but I'm here for it. Thank you so much for inviting us in to deep reflection about who we are and who we want to be as individuals and as a collective, and the world that we are visioning and all the possibility that it takes to get there. It happens every time I'm in space with you that I'm sort of like at a loss for words and reoriented, and like, I'm in that space right now. But I'm super grateful to be in this conversation with you. For folks who may just be joining us, this is Reverend Dr. Dayanara Marte, a healing justice experimenter, practitioner, initiator, and all sorts of other things. Let me give you a little bit of the official bio, and then we'll dive into just conversation and talking about your journey and how you have gotten here to this idea, this concept of a new spiritual contract, and what it really means to do both that personal work in community so that we can build something new. Reverend Dr. Dayanara Marte, who I will refer to as Dr. D from this point out, is a first-generation Latina, Dominican immigrant from Washington Heights, New York City, mother of 2, dedicated to social justice and to human rights. Dr. D works globally as a trusted healing justice advisor, a coach, and consultant for a wide array of community-based organizations working at the intersections of social justice and social service. She has over 25 years of experience and is renowned for her extraordinary ability to identify the emotional and spiritual impact that intergenerational violence and institutional racism have on women and their ability to love, live, and lead. She designs personal and organizational training and facilitation that supports women and girls of color as they develop their leadership and helps them go through healing and transformational change processes from trauma, scarcity, and deficit to healing, resiliency, and sustainability. She has created a model that addresses organizational trauma that is a direct result of the impact of historical trauma and oppression. And I've been able to see the way the impact of the spiritual and emotional healing and health and intelligence that she brings out of folks for folks who are first responders on the front lines, folks who are direct organizers, folks who are leading some of our biggest frontline organizations. And you have been crafting crucial space for folks that I just don't think people realize we desperately need. That our movements are replicating so much of the stuff that we're fighting against. And I hope that in our conversation we can talk about that a little bit.
It
is. Right? Let me do a few nuts and bolts just so everybody knows what's up. This is being live streamed on Facebook through Vanderbilt Divinity's webpage. If you are not able to access the Zoom or anything goes weird, you can find us there. If you've got questions, we're going to do questions toward the end of our time, so you can throw those in the Q&A if you're in the Zoom, or if you're in the Facebook, put those in the Facebook chat or the messages underneath, and Sophia will grab those for us. We'll hold on to those till the end. There is an Otter link if you need a live transcript of our conversation. We aren't able to do captions yet. We haven't quite gotten that technologically advanced, but we can at least give you a live transcript, so that link should be in the chat. And if you are want to tell us who you are, we'd love to see in the chat your name, pronouns, and where you are if you want to share that information. We know that there's folks across the country who are joining us tonight. So those are the nuts and bolts. Let's dive into the first question.
Awesome.
Can you help us orient ourselves to how you understand your call and your work in the world right now? Who are you and how are you in the world? Who are your people? Give us a little bit of Dr. D.
All right. Who am I? I am a stand for the liberation of the most vulnerable, the most impacted, and also the ones that are fighting on the front lines, because we get to be both, right? We get to be these warriors and survivors. I don't think we have a choice, and we also have to stand in the gap where the government and the system fails us. And by default, we become a product of the very thing that we're fighting. And how I came into this work was 1998, a really long time ago, when nobody was talking about healing, or especially not healing and social justice. Like, that was a taboo. I think when I came into this work, people thought that we were just a bunch of lesbians in an organization who were witches wearing white, because we were out in the South Bronx burning sage in the community and throwing Florida water all over the block and going into people's buildings. They didn't even know us. And we would show up at protests with sage and stuff, and people are like, who is this, right? And so I definitely came into this work at a time when healing was not a part of the social justice conversation, but we know historically healing is the center of people of color, right? It's been at the center of all of our movements and organizings historically. I think it's just been a taboo, right? Obviously, over colonization and genocide and the burning of the witches and all of that, we've had to go underground. And so I definitely lucked up, I guess, when I was at Hunter College and I had to do a 100-hour internship in a community organizing class. And one of the founders, Esperanza Martel, was a founder of an organization in the South Bronx called Casa Cabeza Che. And the organization was rooted in creating a safe space for young and adult women of color to be able to heal from internalized oppression. And the belief was that the younger we get to women specifically, even though it was across the gender spectrum, but the earlier we get, the less internalization of this world we have to deal with. And so I embarked on a 25-year journey of undoing my own story. And now I'm doing this as my calling. So that's how I came into this work. I mean, we can go on and on. I know you got a lot of questions, but you gotta stop me.
I'm just going to keep digging a little bit. You have named several times, right, that individuals and organizations have internalized the same things we're pushing back against. I think it is, some of us know that. And I think there are a lot of folks who are like, I feel like that might be true, but I don't really understand what that means. Or there's folks who are like, what are you talking about? Nonprofits and organizations and movements must be oases of perfection and have it all figured out, right? I've definitely never said that and never been around anyone who said that before. So, can you help us, give us some examples or an example of how that shows up?
Sure, I'll give you me as an example. So, I was in this organization who had this amazing spiritual framework to support the healing, right, of the impact of trauma and violence and neglect and poverty. And yet, 15 years later, I found myself having to close down an organization that had shaped the very essence of who I am. And the only thing that I can think of was, the only thing I can do was look at myself, right? There was nobody else to kind of look at. And so as I embarked on my own journey of being this executive director and also being the last one standing, I was like, well, what happened, right? This was supposed to be the place, right? Just like you said, right? Our organization is the place. And so what I found out in retrospect, because healing happens in retrospect, and what I found out in retrospect was that as the executive director of this organization, not only was I leading this organization from this hurt little girl who her mom had abandoned her, but that every sister that had walked as board member, stakeholder, funder, young person that walked in, staff, was actually a little girl that was hurt and had her own story of violence, trauma. Because what is real is that we come into social justice because we have either experienced something, survived something, been through something, right? We have our own stories and we all said, well, it stops with me, right? I'm going to do something about it. That's how social justice gets started. And I think what we forget is that we live at the intersection. We keep throwing intersectionality out here. Intersectionality. I'm like, well, do you understand that people live at the intersections? And so by default, what that means is that it's not that we're not powerful, right? If look at what we have created in trauma. Imagine what we can create if we didn't have a past that we were incomplete with, right? And so what that looks like is, if I don't think I'm good enough, then when I'm writing a grant, I am not going to think I'm good enough to get it. If I have to supervise someone who is mirroring to me my own story, look, I'm not going to like you. By default, we do not trust each other, right? What capitalism, white supremacy, and patriarchy do is that they deplete our spirit. It is the tactic. It's the guerrilla warfare tactic that I think we haven't yet, as a movement, really centered in, right? That by default, that's what it does. And what that means is that we no longer can access our spiritual intuition, our spirit center, so that we are moving without a past, right? Without resentment and self-doubt and not thinking that we're good enough. And, you know, me and you, Lindsay, can be on this call and you don't know if inside I'm like, well, fuck her. You know, like, I'm sorry, I'm using curses, but I don't really like her. She'll never come into my home, right? And so it's these internal dialogues that might have nothing to do with you, Lindsay, right? But we're in now a world where we're talking about racism, and me and you haven't had a conversation yet about how I really feel about white folks, right? Mm-hmm. But we think that because we have a political unity that brought us to this session today, that we just love each other and trust each other. And so what I say, I guess I'm bringing in is I challenge that consistently in spaces, right? Where's the lie? Where's the myth? Let's get down to some serious internal dialogue that we're not sharing with each other, but are actually getting played out in some real passive aggressive ways within our organizations. And we think it's about strategic planning. We think we need more money. We think we need another consultant to come in and do conflict resolution or racial equality work. And it's so much deeper than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I particularly just want to underline the reality of you said white supremacy, capitalism, all of the systems of oppression kill our spirit, and that it's a warfare tactic, right? Like and that it's at the core of this. Like, we can't build another world, build another possibility, imagine it, if we don't understand that our spirits have been directly attacked, and that it shows up in how we show up for each other and how we replicate these habits and silences and how they grow. It was stunning when you said that. I was like, oh yes, it's one of those things that we know, but we don't have name for, and you're helping us name those things.
Yeah. And that's the liberation, right? The liberation is about creating spaces where we can name the way that oppression has impacted us. Mm-hmm. You know, that's part of the model, right? The healing justice model that I am trying to bring to the forefront is one of the pillars is naming and identifying impact on the mind, body, and spirit.
Absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit more about the people that you carry with you? Like, who are your folks?
Like, spiritually?
However you want to name that.
Wow.
I feel like we learn so much when we find out who people will name in a space. Like, who do you carry?
Wow, I've never really thought about that.
You don't have to answer this question academically. That is not how I'm asking this question. I am like asking about your people, your heart.
Sure. I mean, right in front of me, I have an altar. I think who, you know, as an academic, I actually can never quote any book or anything about anything. So I'm definitely not going to do that. But as a human being, I think I just have taken on walking with my own ancestors. And so my father passed away in 2007. I mentioned that I was adopted. And so my mother has become a huge part, my biological mother has become a huge part of who walks with me. I have tremendous spiritual guides that were alive that I keep with me. I actually literally walk with a traveling altar. So I literally take people with me, but also I think I have developed some amazing friendships. I think you talked about in your video, this is a time of reckoning. And so I think that the universe is aligning people that are walking in the light across spirituality, across religion, across, right, all of that. And so I'm finding some amazing people that have become lifelong friendships and partners in different organizations who are also doing healing work and bringing some accountability to healing. And I think who I walk with has changed over time. And right now I'm sitting with a really tremendous group of folks and sisters and community that I really love and trust. So yeah.
Can you?
Then, yeah, no,
Oh,
go ahead.
no, go.
No, because I need to say it. Go ahead.
I'm curious. You said accountability to healing. Will you say a little bit more about that before we go to the next question?
Yeah. So I've been, I had to kind of think about, a lot of people are doing healing work now, which is so amazing for our communities, just for all of us to be jumping into that. And I think there's also a difference between people who practice different modalities and then like people who do transformational kind of healing and recovery work. And so I've had to kind of think a little bit about, well, what makes me different? Because I'm not a practitioner of spirituality. I'm actually just a spiritual person who brings, and so what I created is kind of healing with accountability. Because what we are trying to restore, I think, in movements and organizations and within ourselves is spiritual integrity, right? And how do we create spaces where we can hold each other to account, where we can disrupt oppression when it shows up, where we can disrupt in real time, not in retrospect, but in real time, we can disrupt internalized oppression. We can disrupt white supremacy when it shows up. Like, how do we create healing spaces of accountability within our movements, our organizations, where we have all the tools necessary to disrupt and dismantle it in the moment, in the meeting, in the interaction, and hold accountability in that space so that things are not festering. And to do that with a spiritual kind of grounding and intentionality.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I feel like it's only right to be, because I keep having all these moments where you say a thing and I'm like, I've seen you do that. I've seen this happen. That I have been able to be in space with you, particularly because of Sister Song and your work with Sister Song, and the fact that I get to serve on the board there. And I've been able to see you bring this to life, not only there, but also within the space of the conference or conference spaces, in the midst of meetings, in the midst of, like, I've literally watched you like craft an entire healing circle in the midst of a moment where somebody's like the realities of someone's trauma and all of the internalizations were like just pouring out. It's stunning work. How did you know, not maybe know isn't the right word, but how did you find yourself saying yes to that over and over again?
Wow. So, it was 25 years of my life. And so, I originally started talking about Casa Tabecache, which is the organization where I learned a seasonal model of healing. And part of working in that organization, which is what I think I want to bring to every organization, is that as a staff, as a board member, you had to have your own self-care action plan. You had to have your own healing justice plan in order to work in that organization. There was this wasn't an option, right? And it was like not yoga, right? It wasn't about check-ins and yoga and breathing and shit. All of that is important, but it was more. That was practices that you can do in your house to continue for you to have integrity. But we had to attend a healing circle every first Saturday of the month. And I led a lot of those healing circles. I actually attended a healing circle every first Saturday of the month for 10 years of my life without fail. No vacation, no nothing. I was there. And part of the work was that I as a facilitator, as a leader, cannot take someone somewhere I have not been. And so I've just continued that for me that was it. I was like, this is the work that needs to happen. And how do we create this organization inside of every single organization, at least the political unity, the spiritual unity of that organization that was so important.
Yeah. When you talk about it, so I think when people think about this, they think about super like healing in ways, I don't know, like a protest, right? Or something like that seems big or obvious. But what you're talking about is an incredibly intimate, long-term commitment, which I think is very counter to a lot of what we think about as like, oh, I need to show up right now or do this thing immediately like this. Can you speak a little bit about the importance of the depth and the intimacy? Like, how big was that group? Give us some of the details so we can feel it a little bit.
Yeah, I think two things that I want to say, right? Long term, I think we need to understand that racism, sexism, homophobia, right? All those things have been around way before us. They're probably going to be here way after us. And so healing doesn't stop. As long as we live in this world, you need to be in a healing practice for the rest of your life, because you're going to empty something out and complete with something, some heartbreak, some experience, and then somebody's going to come. You're going to turn on the news. You're going to be in another relationship. You're going to go to another organization that sucks, right? All of those things. And somebody's going to fill your cup back up and the healing begins. And so, organizations need to take on healing, not as a practice, but actually as a mission for its staff and workers throughout the duration of them working within your organization, the same way that we take on community members throughout the duration of the existence of the organization. And so in my past work around doing healing circles, we trained really, really hard to bridge community organizing and spirituality. And we opened up our doors every first Saturday of the month. We held space for 25 women. We never knew what they were coming for, who it was that was coming. They were with us for 5 hours, and it was an intentional space to support folks in releasing violence and oppression without the story. I think people think healing circles are narrative spaces, and for a lot of people that's what it was, or that's what it is. But healing circles for the work that I used to do is about supporting the body in releasing energy so that it does not manifest in your body as some form of dis-ease. It was not about your story, and it wasn't about healing individually. It was about the one thing that this country is the most afraid of is healing in community, which is why they take all of our sacred spaces away. And so, and so we made sure that we provided a space for sisters to give birth to each other and themselves every first Saturday of the month. And it was seasonal healing, so it was really integrated in the medicine of the season, the healing opportunity that season gifted us, because we as people are in a constant cycle of death and rebirth, right? Or at least if that's what people believe, that's the spirituality that I bring into this space.
Thank you so much. I think that just brought so much more to life. And the naming of healing as mission for movements, for organizations, because it's so vital, because it isn't as if the work is something else, that healing is part of the work, right? Going back to your naming that white supremacy literally, and capitalism and all the other pieces are literally stripping us of our connection with spirit, connection with the sacred, right? It becomes vital to the work. It's such a mind shift, I think, for so many folks who've been in the organizing space or thinking about whatever the movement work is or run a nonprofit. We miss that this is actually core.
And it becomes very individual, right? Because it's a person, social justice is very personal. And so, one of the things that keep me kind of aligned is to have a list always in front of me, what I am fighting is, by default, capitalism and white supremacy and patriarchy deplete the spirit of community and people, especially people of color. That is the name of the game. Mm-hmm. By default, that means that on a personal level, we do not trust, right? We do not trust each other. That is what capitalism and white supremacy does. It takes away our ability to trust ourselves. That's where the spiritual depletion comes in, right? We have no ability to think outside of ourselves. We need to now go to social workers. We need to go get medicine. We need to do healthcare. We need to have a counselor. We need all of those things. But we need to start creating spaces where we understand that people are whole, perfect, and complete, that everybody has a right to be enraged, that yes, depression will come, yes, grief will take over, yes, you might feel a little crazy, and that is part of living in this world. But if we create spaces where people can get out of their way to restore and center and say, wait a second, I'm not crazy. I have every right to feel this way. But I can also go and light a candle and talk to my Father and talk to the high God and talk to whoever, the divine, whatever we want to call it. And, I get to shake this off. This is not going to eat me up. This is not going to paralyze me. We also have that gift, right? And so, so that's very important, is to keep at the forefront a deep understanding of what it is that white supremacy, capitalism, patriarchy is really doing in our communities, right? And where addiction comes from, and where reproductive, health and disease comes from, so that we are not out here blaming ourselves or each other, which is, I think, a lot of what happens when it becomes very personal.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you've named reproductive oppression and the impacts of reproductive injustice. So let's talk a little bit about the fact that reproductive justice is one of the places that you have grown from. You've been in the work of reproductive justice as a piece of it, at least, for a long while. How did living that out start for you? How did you come to a reproductive justice space? And tell us some of the story about how you got from there to where you are now, and how you talk about where you are now.
Yeah, I think my reproductive justice story kind of started when I was born. And so, I was born in a brothel in the Dominican Republic. My mother was a prostitute in a brothel that my father and his wife owned. And she was a young girl, who gave birth, had to sleep with her pimp and gave birth to me. And my stepmother couldn't have children. And I wrote about this really recently. My birthday was September 6th, and I wrote about how these two women kind of put things to the side, right? Obviously, there's a whole backstory, but at the core of me and my rebirth and having to create a different story, I think what was great about this story is that these two women put their story of, somebody cheating on somebody, that you're a prostitute, that you're a hoe, whatever the story is, to really determine what was going to be in the best interest for who I was going to be in the world, right? And so when you talk about who I work with, I mentioned my mother because that is huge in my healing journey of having to transform my story from being this abandoned little girl to actually being a gift, right? To a woman who couldn't have children, right? And I was the gift to her. And so, that's also part of what we need to do, is start creating spaces to transform narratives, right? So that got, I think, bigger as I walked into this organization whose mission was grounded in reproductive health. It wasn't called reproductive justice at that time. It was a reproductive health organization. And again, it was about creating a safe space for women of color to tap into their spirituality, to use their cultural and spiritual tools to heal their bodies from the manifestation of oppression and historical trauma and racism. And, when our stories have no place to go, they will manifest as some form of disease. And I think we need to start understanding that this country banks on that, right? That spiritual depletion equals disease in our minds, our bodies, and our spirits. And it is, it's capitalism, right? They make money from it. And so, of course, our communities are dying of breast cancer and ovarian cancer and obesity and, all the reproductive ills. And so for me, the conversation of healing justice and reproductive justice are actually one. I don't like to separate them, right? Because they're just the same. And when I left, we closed down this organization, and I started thinking about what was next for me. I really wanted to, what I decided was, well, not one more sister is going to lead without options and tools to be able to lead from a place of her most powerful self, and not this little girl who feels unworthy and not enough and that doesn't belong and all of that stuff. And so more recently, I have taken on doing executive coaching and bringing healing justice to organizations. And I think there's a myth that you can't do work in the whole organization, right? That the ED or the leaders need one consultant and the staff need another consultant and then the board needs another consultant. And I'm actually, no, I'm gonna be all your consultants. I'll be the organizational consultant. And, you know, it takes a lot of confidentiality, obviously a lot of spiritual integrity to hold that space. But if you do have different consultants in that space, you know, it's very important for them to all work together, right? Because we're working with people's egos, we're working with imposters, we're working with people protecting themselves. And so sometimes when you get together, you're like, that's not what I heard, that's not what I heard, that's not what they said, right? And so I think that's how I come through, and still am kind of at the intersection of reproductive justice. I've done a lot more work in the anti-gender-based violence field, but again, I think they're all the same. I'm really trying to merge kind of reproductive justice and gender-based violence because I think they're one and the same conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you say a little bit more about how those things are linked, right? And maybe give us a little definition of reproductive justice for folks who might be conflating it with reproductive health or reproductive. And if you don't want to do it, I can do it. We can tag team on it, but give us a little bit of sense of what, when you're talking about reproductive justice, what does that mean for you and how does that connect with gender-based violence?
Yes, I think that I think the movement has come a very long way and we're still fighting, right? In kind of defining those two things. But reproductive health was about service, right? Service, a delivery, where you go to a Planned Parenthood, you go to a clinic, right? You get yourself checked, GYN, STDs, right? Family planning, contraception. And I think people are still very much stuck in there. And I think there's a reason people are, because it's very tangible, right? Like I go to the GYN, I get a result. I'm getting an abortion or I am not, right? You get to have a real, just tangible opinion and you get stick by it. Reproductive justice encompasses, I think, the whole entire person. And it is not just about service, but it is about advocacy, it's about organizing, it is about laws and the impact that that has on somebody's ability to choose, right? And it's not just about birthing, it is about sex and sexuality. It's about, you know, your whole identity. Yeah, it's about your whole identity. And so it's a very different frame. And it does include choice and services for women, but it looks at the whole individual. And I think that why I like to link gender-based violence and reproductive justice is because when I talk about gender-based violence, I also talk about the whole, right? And gender-based violence includes white supremacy, capitalism, and oppression. And if we're saying that by default, that level of violence manifests as a form of disease in our bodies, then gender-based violence also manifests in our bodies as some form of disease. So if you have gone through any form of sexual assault, rape, incest, trafficking, sexual exploitation, right? Just all of it, then that is also reproductive violence. And it will manifest as disease in your body in some way, shape, or form. So I think the reproductive justice movement needs to understand that it has survivors in it. And that there are victims and survivors within the movement, and they're not separate. If victims and survivors don't go over here for services and then over here for their reproductive health or their reproductive justice, it's, you know, that we're here, we're everywhere. So that's why I bring it together.
Yeah, and our building families and building community and right. We are all everywhere. Is the truth of it.
And it's about our quality of life, right? It's about our quality, and vice versa, right? So the gender-based violence field also needs to understand that reproductive justice is at the center of their movement as well.
Yeah, there's so much work to do. Every day I think that like maybe there's like a shortage of things to do, which happens, which is weird. It's a weird scarcity mindset. Like one of the weird ways that whiteness shows up is like I get convinced that there's not enough, and I'm like, no, there's just so much, so much. Mm-hmm. Oh goodness. All right. So let's talk about the spiritual contract, and then we'll use that to shift into talking about questions. We titled this question inspired from your writing that you did this spring, which I think our wonderful humans, Shatika and Sophia, will share in the box. The article you wrote, or the blog that you wrote, was "This revolution is calling us to create a new spiritual contract." Every day, there is an onslaught of white supremacist, capitalist, colonialist control and violence. We know that. Just the last couple weeks, we've seen this when no one is held responsible for Breonna Taylor's murder, as dozens are forcibly sterilized in ICE detention, as the person in the White House overtly makes claims for non-democratic power, like refusing to peacefully transition. We could list examples, though, for forever, right? How do you describe sort of our current spiritual contract or spiritual situation? Like, how would you describe the world we're living in? You've done this a little bit, but help us.
Wow, what world are we living in? Jesus Christ, what world are we living in? That is the question. I think you said it. It is a reckoning. It is a time of reckoning, and I describe this time as a time when, like, all social contract, even the illusion of any social contract that we thought we had with the government is gone. I think it hasn't been clear. It's clearer now. And I think every generation has had this form of reckoning, right? We didn't know it was going to come this way to us, but I think that we knew something needed to come. We just didn't know it was going to come this way. I think prior to COVID, we were all exhausted anyway, and we're already thinking about how this election had to be different, right? And that we had to have a different turnout of events. And then I think COVID really exacerbated that. And obviously there's a lot of conspiracy theory around COVID and why it happened at the time that it happened. I think we have two ways of looking at this. I think this is definitely shook us to our core. And I think we needed to be shaken to the core. I always talk to God and I'm like, damn, but not this way, but shit, and that's with everything, right? With a heartbreak I'm going through. I'm like, really? Did you have to make my heart like that? Like, I knew I needed to learn a lesson, but like, not like this, right? And so we can look at it as this really like not good time, right? When we are losing so many people without any level of accountability, and so many families are just gonna feel this on so many levels for generations to come, right? We talk about historical trauma, but historical trauma is being created right now. And so as a healer, I always think about, what are we gonna have to be ready for, right? When this kind of dies down a little bit, kind of the aftermath of it. But what I've done is I've kind of taken it, and the work that I do in my coaching and stuff is really had people to take this opportunity to ask themselves some questions, to ask themselves, like, what's the reckoning that is happening within you to have to live this time, to have to experience this time, to, be in isolation in your home by yourself, or to be with family and children, like, what's going on in here, right? And whatever our spirituality was, the only way out of this is we're going to have to step it up about 20 to 100 times fold. So if you already have a spiritual practice, we better be doing that at 1,000,000 right now. We have no time to get sick. And yet we're dealing with something that's taking over our lungs and affecting our capacity to breathe. And so some of the questions that I've been asking folks is, what are you willing to walk away from in your life that's not working, right? What are some things that you can no longer compromise or negotiate for yourself in your life? What needs to get restored within you? Like, are you ready to take on healing as a foundational practice, and really take it on as an accountability, a place of self-evaluation, self-reflection, where nobody else has to hold you to account for it, but where you can actually show up to a table accountable, right? And really asking people, like, what do you stand for? Because I can no longer just be in conversation with people. I need to know, like, what side of the revolution are you on? What, what can I count on you for, in my life and in the revolution, right? So if I'm walking down the street, and somebody is sexist or homophobic or, racist, like, are you just gonna stand there? Like, where are we? What are some of the things that we need to walk away from, that no longer serves us anymore? And that no matter what happens, I think in this election, what I want for our community is to be aligned spiritually. Like, we cannot afford for the political times to take us off our spiritual game anymore. Yeah.
Well, and the way you have made it clear for us is like that's actually that's a power move, for lack of a better phrase, right? Like, there is power in reclaiming our spiritual well-being, our healing, our connection, our commitment to that, because it is at the core of how white supremacy and capitalism debilitate us and feed disease, right?
Like, if we have no option, if we feel like social justice is not an option, I'm going to actually say our spirituality is no longer an option either. And that looks different for different people. So I'm not talking about, hey, everybody go out and do a ritual and go kill a bird. And, I'm really, some of us are spiritual in revolution and action in the street, right? Taking back our sovereignty, our self-determination, our human right to speak and to speak up. And so those of us that are doing that, let's light a candle of protection around them, because they serve a purpose. And then there's some of us who are going to have to, ritualize, be in deep ritual every week. And if we know, what's the date, November 6th or something, right? The election is coming down. Some of us will be at the polls organizing, and some of us need to be at home lighting some candles and invoking our ancestors and praying and doing what you know how to do, whatever that means for you, to overturn. We have the power to overturn anything with our spiritual integrity.
And thank you for naming the realities of, like, that it shows up differently for different folks. I think people keep trying to shoehorn themselves into, like, oh, this is what healing justice looks like, or this is what healing will look like for me, or I need to do this particular ritual, or I have to show up in the streets like this. And we need everyone everywhere. Like,
everybody, bring it on. Everybody, whatever this looks like to you, bring your brooms, bring your sage, bring yourself, bring your candles, right? Like, it doesn't matter. I think healing doesn't look a particular way. It doesn't always wear white and beads. It's, and I think that we need to start undoing the myths of that, because that, for people who already don't think they're enough and don't belong, when they see that, they're like, well, then I'm not that. And so then I can't be. And listen, I am the most craziest spiritual person you will ever know. You will not see me doing meditation or yoga. I love McDonald's. I live the contradictions. And so you can't tell I'm spiritual just by looking at me. Actually, you will probably get the whole opposite of that. But when I need to be on, I'm on, right? And I'm on, not in this world. I'm tapping into something so much bigger than me, right? So
you're tapping in and you're sharing it. You serve as a vessel, as a translator, as a conduit, to help folks, to help sort of bring the healing along, but also help bring folks into that connection. It is a gift. Well, I think you've named it in a lot of ways, but are there any particular things that you would want to name about what a new spiritual contract really looks like? You've named some of the questions you ask folks. You've given us this stunning example of a meditation in the beginning. But what are some of the places that people might start? What are some of the things that people might be thinking about as they rework their own spiritual contracts?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think just even saying like what I have been doing, what are the things that I have been doing that no longer work for me around my spirituality, that I need to maybe do something different. You know, have I been in integrity with my spirituality? Like I'm a good talk about it, but am I really doing that? You know, and I think more tangible, right? This is the time, one, we cannot do this alone. So everybody, please create community. Create community. There's nothing more spiritual than healing in community. And healing in community can just be like talking shit about, the world that we want to live in and just putting it out there. So I think first it's just about a deep intentionality, um, and knowing that you have a power to manifest the different worlds, right? Because again, by default, not only are we spiritually depleted, but that spiritual depletion takes away our ability to dream another world. And what is going to take to get us through this time is that we all start dreaming another world, however that is going to look like for you. And so once you decide that another world is possible and that you actually can participate in creating that, then putting into motion what it is, then sharing it with your community and creating a system of accountability, right? So the thing about community is that it serves as a kind of accountability, a place of responsibility where, Lindsay, if you know that, we're going to get off this call and you're like, hey, yeah, spiritual contract, we get to find what that means for ourselves. And then you can, tell me, hey, Dee, so what did you do this week, right? Did you take that bath? Did you talk to your ancestors? Did you clean your altar? Did you clean your office? Sometimes it's not even an altar, but like, did you clean your office? Is your, is the quality of life in your home a representation of the world that you want to live in? So is it clean? Did you unclutter? Did you finish the to-do list? Like sometimes it's just that tangible, right? To get in alignment with your spirit and declutter around you and start, putting some things in place that maybe have been in your space that you haven't had time to do. And I think that is spirituality as well, right? When what is around us is a representation of the world that we want to live in. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, we're going to shift into answering some questions. I already got 3 in the chat. If other folks have questions, feel free to put them in the chat in Zoom or in the chat in Facebook. This one comes from one of our attendees, and they said, love how Dr. D, you are able to interrupt and address things in the moment and stop the dysfunction. What are some ways people less skilled like myself can begin?
Breath. So when something's happening in a meeting, in a collective space, or wherever you find yourself in your home, and take a breath and acknowledge that something has happened. Sometimes I don't need to facilitate something. Sometimes I'm just the only person that says, wait a second, did we all feel that? Did something just happen here? Are we just gonna let that slide? Because I'm not taking this with me. Like, no, that's not gonna happen, right? We're not gonna leave this space acting as if, things are okay. And so sometimes it's just as simple as acknowledging that something went down, right? That there was a shift in energy in a space. Did anybody feel that shift in energy? Did anybody just see that passive aggressive situation that happened across, between those two people? Because sometimes you kind of look around and are like, is this really happening right now? Is nobody gonna say some shit, right? And it's there, but you don't feel like you're the right person to say it. And so I think I am charging everyone with, you are the right person. There's nobody else that's gonna do this for us. You are the right person. So something that simple.
Yeah, just the taking the risk of acknowledging it and of trusting yourself that like whatever your gut is saying, that somebody else probably is experiencing the weirdness that you also think is not, that you think is off. Beautiful. And I will say, like, the more you do it, it grows. Like, it feels more, you feel more comfortable. It feels less awkward. It becomes more normalized. All right, another one. This one's from Nancy. Something that tugged on me in Dr. D's first answer was her statement, healing happens in retrospect. I would love to hear more about this understanding of the process of healing. So can you say more about healing happening in retrospect?
Yeah, I think people we live in a world right now where we all have an opinion about something, right? We all have these expectations about, well, if you're a healer, then you should be doing this now, right? Or that should not have happened. And we're just not cutting ourselves or each other slack. And so I think we need to start understanding that healing doesn't happen in the moment. I'm trying to bring that into space, right? But that required for me to do my healing so that then I can see the need for it in another space. But when we are going through violence, when we're witnessing it, we're not healing at the same time. We are going through the violence. And it happens on a spectrum. So you go through something and then your body internalizes that. You create a story around whatever that means. Well, I knew that was going to happen to me. It was my fault. I shouldn't have been here. I told you I wasn't good enough. Nobody loves me, right? Your body goes through a process, and then you go to counseling for some of us, right? We try to find some way out of that. But we don't do that before we hurt a couple of people in the process. And then we'll kind of get it together, right? And do, counseling or whatever. The counseling will, I think, some healing deals with what happened to you. Mm-hmm. What healing in retrospect does is that we get to see it after the fact. So we don't have words for what happened to us or what's happening to us along the way. And I think that people think we're hurtful intentionally. That's not how that works. We just go and hurt people or, do what we do. And then there's a moment where we sit and we're like, holy shit, what did I just do? Where did that come from? God, I got to retrace my steps. Now I need to call Lindsay and I need to call all of these people and ask some questions and apologize, whatever it is that we do. But yeah, healing happens in retrospect. It doesn't happen while we're being abused or going through the violence.
It was a really clear way of moving us through that. Thank you so much. All right. I've got at least two more, maybe another couple more in the process. What do you think, this connects to what you just named for us, particularly talking about trauma. What do you think is the healing justice approach to someone coming forward with a sexual violence experience?
Wow.
It's just a small question. Like this, sure. There's a simple answer, right?
Yeah, I think it depends where they're coming to the forefront too. But the one thing that you always do is believe. You just believe the person. And once you believe the person, then depending on where they did it, there's obviously certain things that need to be in place, right? So if it's within your organization, then what are the systems that the organization has in place to manage a disclosure, right? And I think what's happening now is that, a lot of organizations, because we're such at an introspection, a lot of organizations do not have systems in place for that level of disclosure, or are like, hey, I'm a homeless organization, or I'm an LGBTQ, we don't really deal with that, or I'm a reproductive justice, I don't really know what to do. And it's like, we can't afford to continue to do that anymore. If it's in your home, obviously that has a lot of implications. If it's within the movement, but what we don't do is choose a side. In a sexual assault disclosure, there's never a side. There is an experience that we believe and a story that we believe. Never ever choose a side. And there was something else I wanted to say about that. It's escaping me to come back up. But yeah.
Well, I actually have a follow-up question to that particular, because I think what you're saying, not choosing a side, I think there's so many people who'd be like, but that's not what it means for me to show up well for somebody, is that I have to choose a side, that I have to make these declarations that and I'll name that I've both been in that position, and I've also been in a position where I feel like that's not the right move, but then I feel pressure from other folks who are like, no, what you're doing is not justice. Like what you're doing is wrong. So I'm wondering if you can talk about that complication a little bit.
That's a big one. That is a big one. I've been in the same situation and had to really check in. And I think that this is where creating a new spiritual contract comes in, because it's about what do you stand for in the world. And so if my stand as a healing justice consultant is to bring integrity to spaces, then I can't choose a side. What I can do is hear the sides. I can hear the story. And so I think it depends on your positionality as well, right? Within movements and stuff, but, and also the level of violence that happens, right? Because a lot of the violence is unseen, it's interpretation. And that's why people feel like they have to choose, right? Because if your friend comes to you and is like, well, let me tell you what happened and they harmed me, you know, because we're also now using all of these big words, right, for experiences that we're having. And but all we have is this one person's story, right? So I'm a stand for accountability, right? So when someone discloses any level of harm, I want to know, where am I holding accountability? I'm not choosing a side. I want to know, where am I? So where do we hold accountability in what just happened, right? And what is that going to look like for the survivor and for the perpetrator? Because, you know, none of them can be isolated. We're not going to create another world in both of them being, in any of them being isolated, right? That's not transformative justice.
And it's naming again that this is another world that we're imagining, I think is so important, right? And we see this in the conversation around defunding the police and abolition, right? Is people being like, well, we can't just get rid of prisons or whatever because we don't have a, like, it'll just be mass chaos. But this is, we have to do this small level, the starter work of building another world. And we have to imagine it and do it on this interpersonal level, right? So it's not that tomorrow we're going to have an entirely transformed globe and transformative justice and abolition are going to be the rule of the day, but it requires that we act differently now to imagine right now. And that's part of what you're naming and calling us to more accountability around our own work, around our own healing, around our own contracts, and in our relationships and communities, right? It's like,
yeah, and when we choose, you know, check in with yourself, right? So a practice is, if you find yourself, you know, being, like you said, peer pressured into choosing, or just choosing because we love someone or whatever, just use it as a moment to check in. Wait a minute, because choices, it makes it personal. Then it's not about the story anymore, it's about you. Well, how am I going to look good? You know what I'm saying? And what are people going to say about me? And, you know, remember, I'm a little girl that's been hurt and nobody loves me. So if I don't go, you know, so then it's about you. It has nothing to do with the disclosure anymore. So, you know, check in. Just use it as a reference point if you do find yourself getting paralyzed by a disclosure, or wanting to choose in a disclosure. You know, and all the things. It's all part of the process in the game. But I think now I'm just telling people, you know, sit, reflect for a second, you know, use it as a source of self-reflection and self-evaluation.
And that creates opportunities for people to get real clear when maybe they are like, I can't be the person connecting with the person who caused harm because I have too much unresolved stuff to carry into that, but I can recognize that and not act out of it, which is its own skill set.
Years of skill set.
Right. Yeah. And the length of time, right? It's helpful to remind ourselves that we are allowed to grow and change, and we are you've said this, right? We're continually healing. So it's not like we're going to get it right.
Oh, there's no right way to this. That's why you need a community of people. There's absolutely no right way. And I told you I'm the epitome of the contradiction of it. So for as much as I can put on wine and burn sage, I'm also the person that needs to reflect in a relationship, because sometimes I want to kick somebody's ass, right? And I'm like, oh my God, I'm a social justice person. I'm violence free. And I have to check in. But So I can't depend on myself to have integrity, because by default, capitalism has told me I need to protect myself by any means necessary. So I cannot be the person to also hold that level of integrity and accountability. I need to give that to trusted community to say, D, you are so out of alignment right now. Like, we get it, but no, you know, that's not what you stand for. There's a different way of managing that. Or like, hey, how can we hold you to some level of accountability, right? To like what you just did in your relationship. That was not okay, right? Or how you showed up as a leader, like that was not okay. So, you know, I think we need to bring compassion and some peace and some ease and grace to healing. It is the, you know, we've really romanticized self-love, but it is the hardest journey to ever walk on. And you need to find a safe space to be able to break down and break into pieces. And you need to have some folks around you that have broken down and know what it is to put you back together, because you're not going to be able to do that all by yourself.
Can you say a little bit about how you build those relationships with folks who can call you into account?
I build them by holding them to account. It's a battle. It's a battle, but I think me and Lindsay are doing it right now on this call. It's a conversation. And it's a building trust over time, right? So I've known Lindsay for a long time. We've been in a lot of spaces. We've got to go collaborate and build spirituality together, but we kind of still never knew each other. And then Lindsay's like, I'm going to bring you to do this. And so that builds another level of trust between us, right? And however this conversation goes, it's like, it's going to solidify yet something else and something else. So the more that we build relationships where we can hold our word to each other, right? And take risks of like, oh, I think you're important enough to come, you know, participate in this and do this with me. We start building that level of friendship, which is like, oh, if I can work with you, then maybe I can do this with you. If I do these things with you, then maybe we can do these other things. And so it's kind of like a building block. But when you have a community already, because we all do, we have friends that we've been with for lifetimes and years, new people who are just like kindred spirits, right? The first thing is to sit and be like, okay, so how are we going to do this friendship, right? Because what we know for sure is we're traumatized. We're living in this crazy time. I know I have some things that I'm working through. You know, let's put them on the table, right? Because I want to give you some level of power so that if I ever show up, and it's a conversation of love, Lindsay, you know, with someone, right? That where you can say to that person, I love you so much that I don't want to hurt you. So if you ever see me doing something that hurts you, I'm either not aware of it, not on my game. It's, you know, and you get to say to me, hey, that's not the relationship we have. We love each other, right? So where's this coming from today? Why are you treating me like this today? Why are you talking to me like this today? So it's a level of intimacy. And intimacy is something else that we need to build, because it's something else that gets so depleted on us, right? So it's a constant building block. But you know, where you see hurt and pain, it means that love has left the building. And in order to restore and create safe space, we first need to bring love back into it. Yeah.
And you've been, throughout this whole conversation and all of your work, you're implicitly talking about intimacy with yourself, intimacy with ancestors and your sacred traditions or practices, and that builds some foundation for being able to be intimate with your community and your friends and those you're in movement with. We've got a couple more questions that I want to use to wrap up. One follows up for the last question. So Melinda asks, does believing them, so if somebody comes and talks about sexual violence, does believing them mean that you've chosen a side?
I think, Melinda, you need to ask that to yourself. And I think we all need to ask that to ourselves. Does believing this person right mean that I am choosing their side? because I think belief doesn't have a choice. Belief, there's no choice, right? You just believe. You're like, okay, you said you went down the street and somebody hurt you. I believe you. You're not gonna go down the street and go find them and then be like, well, now I talked to the person and they told me that they really did it, so I believe you, right? So belief doesn't choose a side. Belief is just I believe. And it's a big conversation we're having right now with, trusting Black women, right? Trusting women of color to, when it comes to these political times, right? Trusting community. And so with survivors, it's the same conversation, right? Believe survivors. And that doesn't mean that you've chosen. It just means that this person is one less person that this person needs to justify what has happened to them with.
The not having to jump through all the hoops of convincing you of anything. It just gets to exist.
Exactly.
And then things can play out from there.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. All right. So we're going to wrap up with this one, and then I'll give you a chance to share any sort of closing brilliance you want to impart. Can you talk about how you actively remove patriarchy from spirituality?
How do you actively remove patriarchy from spirituality? Wow.
Again, another small question.
Wow. Well, this is the Vanderbilt School, right? And so and not everybody who's here is from that, right? But when we go to school, I think to learn divinity, right, we are looking at different historical religions, right, and spiritualities and divinities that have existed throughout time. And we know that for a fact, some of them are just very patriarchal. That is their job. And so I think it's about studying, being very clear, just like we have to be clear about the impact of white supremacy in our lives, is being very clear about what spirituality or divinity are you practicing, and is it inherently patriarchal? Mm-hmm. Because if something is inherently something, you can't take it away, right? You need to practice it the way that it is. I think I have chosen very intentional to bring back matriarchy, right? So I study matriarchal spirituality, where I am honoring the divine feminine in everybody, including men and, those across the gender spectrum, right? That spirituality actually has no gender. And that I can go into any space and teach, because what I am teaching is people's personal divine right to manifest, and that is something that we are born with. And yeah, so, it's a choice to know and to be very intentional to educate yourself around the divinity and spirituality that you're choosing, because it inherently might be patriarchal. And I yeah.
Well, and even encouraging, teaching folks, leading folks to reclaim that pushes back against the patriarchal separation of people from the divines, as you said, right?
Right.
Like, that in and of itself is a practice of pushing back against all the systems that might separate us and deplete our spirit.
Yeah, because spirituality is an organizing tool, and it is our medicine, it is our weapon, and it is our most effective organizing tool. So, when we start reclaiming it, then all of a sudden we have COVID. When we start reclaiming it, then all of a sudden, policies to punish us start getting created, right? Then all of a sudden we have curfew. Then all of a sudden, right, because the fear is that when people get together to tell their stories and to heal, transformation will happen and it will be felt across the globe. That is the power that we have as spiritual beings, and that is the power that they are most afraid of, right? So that's why we're living in the world we're living in right now.
Absolutely. Well, any other final thoughts that you want to help close us with tonight? I mean, that was one. Spirituality being our organizing tools. No joke.
Final thoughts. I think I want to give people some peace and ease that no matter what happens, we got this. We have always had this. We will always have this. And the way out of these next couple of months is to tap into your spirit. Let spirit lead. Our humanity is going to protect us by any means necessary. And so we can't, what's the word? We can't depend on our humanity right now because our humanity is like, go to sleep. We are exhausted. We are tired. We don't want to do this anymore. There's nothing else. I mean, it's just enough, right? Our humanity is like enough. But spirit who has lived here before, spirit who knows freedom and liberation is saying, let me lead. Just move out of the way. Have faith. Put me at the forefront. Tag me in, you know. You can rest. I will do the rest. And so, you know, for all of us to really trust that. If we trust nothing else, is to trust that. And I also have a gift, Lindsay, to all the participants. This sacred kind of contract that I wrote for Elephant Journal also comes with a beautiful meditation compilation that I did, also called the Spiritual Contract Meditation Series. And it is an opportunity for, you know, and I know we're reading podcasts and we're doing all of these things these days, but this is a wonderful opportunity for those of us that do want to take on a spiritual contract and to bring some integrity to it, to have some meditations that you can be listening to, you know, early in the morning, on your way to bed, while you're organizing, put it in as a check-in in your meetings, you know, bring it to your revolutionary spaces. And so I want to give that for free to everybody who is joining us today.
Thank you. That is a tremendous gift. We are going to make sure that we send out the information to everyone who registered via the Zoom. If you are watching on Facebook and you want this, just shoot a quick message to Vanderbilt Divinity School and we can make sure that we share it that way. And we will get it to everyone who is paying attention right now. But thank you. I am super excited about that personally. Like, I already can imagine some of the ways that that's going to show up in my world. So thank you so much for that gift, for the gift of this conversation, for the gracious gift of your spirit and the world. I am so deeply, deeply grateful to know you and to get to share space with you. You've absolutely shifted my understanding of all sorts of things. So thank you again for sharing some of that tonight with a whole host of folks.
Thank you for having me on. This is just an honor, not just to be one of your speakers, but to actually kick off your series, and for us to finally find a place to connect and build and continue to create that intimacy in our relationships. And I'm looking forward to this beautiful spiritual contract that we're creating with ourselves, with the Divinity School, and with all the partners that had, you know, that thought that this was important for our communities right now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We're so grateful. And thank y'all for being with us tonight. Have a good evening, everybody. We'll see you next month for the next installment of the Relevant Religion series.